Good afternoon, everybody. Małgorzata Bonikowska, the Center for International Relations. Welcome to our Tuesday talks, Zoom the World, how we call them. We do it together with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and we discuss the world, international affairs, European policy and situation in Europe. And today we decided to focus on Portugal, also because it's an interesting country, of course, it's an EU member state, but now we have a Portuguese presidency in the EU Council. So we would like also to discuss what is this presidency in the current system. Let me welcome our guests. First of all, the foreigner, Paulo Casaca. Good afternoon, Paulo.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation.
We are very grateful that you are with us. Paulo, as you can imagine, he is Portuguese. He used to work in the European Parliament. He was a member of the European Parliament from Portugal. Actually, he's born in Azores, so a very well-known destination for some Poles who like to go for vacations. And he was working also in the EU Council, and it has been more than 25 years you are in Brussels, Paulo, right?
It is, yes.
So half Portuguese, half, I don't know, Brussels citizen, European.
Yeah, very European, I think, it's true.
Currently, he's a leader of two organizations. One is called Asia Democratic Forum, and another one is Arch Humankind, so very active person. And I hope, Paulo, you will help us to understand the Portuguese mindset today. And Dr. Jarosław Pietras. Good morning, good afternoon. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Hello.
Dr. Jarosław Pietras, all those who follow the European affairs, I don't need to introduce him, has been so many years he has been involved in European affairs in Poland. First, he was working in UKIE, in the Ministry of European Affairs. He was a minister also of European Affairs. Then he moved to Brussels, and has been 13 years he was working in the council of the European Union. So the heart of the presidency, actually, he was the top Polish official in the EU structure. He was a director general of this body, and now in College of Europe. So welcome both. Thank you for joining us. I would start with Mr. Pietras. It's not only because he was my former boss, but also because we want to understand now more the role of the presidency in the institutional system of the European Union after the Lisbon Treaty. Nomen omen, Lisbon is again in Portugal. But since the Lisbon Treaty, the presidency's role is a little bit weaker than it used to be. How could you describe it now? Jarek.
It's true that many things are related to Lisbon. You may remember Lisbon Strategy, then Lisbon Treaty, and for a country that have joined in middle of 80s, so it is not from the beginning. It is very remarkable how much of imprint have left over the EU. But the presidency now is a bit different. It's a very strange construction, but on the other hand, is relatively simple. Strange because presidency role is to conduct work of all 27 member states. And there is a certain balance between institutions. European Commission can be a bit compared, not fully, to kind of executive body. It has got programs, agencies, it has things to put in practice in real terms. Then you've got European Parliament, which is legislator, but is also co-legislator. So the second co-legislator is a council. And council is composed of ministers of 27 member states who are being directed by the rotating presidency. So every half a year, someone from a member state, consecutive member state, comes to Brussels, and if there is a meeting, whatever type of preparatory or final meeting of a council is being chaired by the presidency.
But
it looks like
in practice, what does this matter? How much the countries can really influence this 6 months?
First, it is difficult. It is difficult, but it's also the question of member states willing to achieve something. Please remember that initiative belongs to the Commission. Commission comes with the legislation in a draft form, and then the Council deliberates. So member states are saying, well, we like this, we don't like this. We think that this issue should be regulated by the law, but maybe in a different form than Commission proposing. And it's the role of a presidency to find agreement between 27 member states to finalize the legislation. And there is a final in the voting, and the law is being adopted by the Council. But it's not the end of a journey. There is still Parliament to negotiate. So you've got the Council and the Parliament negotiating with the presence of the Commission. It's called trialogue, in order to finalize the law. And all those works are being initiated, carried out under the supervision of presidency. So presidency has got some tools in hand. First, it organizes the process of decision making in a council. So when you've got legislation, it sets the dynamics of discussing this legislation. If presidency doesn't like a piece of legislation, because it may think that something is really difficult for them, they could postpone it for future and do not take it seriously and strongly in the agenda. So the presidency has got a function of agenda setting of what is important at this moment in European Union, especially what is important for the Council. Obviously, it's not a full independence, because like now, you've got COVID, and suddenly presidency has to deal with something which is urgent, current, and important. Therefore, even if they try to put agenda by the presidency, it has to be amended by the circumstances.
Before we discuss further the Portuguese agenda, I want to move to Paulo. Paulo, because you remember also the previous times Portugal took the leadership, the presidency. It is actually the fourth time now for Portugal. I remember the times in 2011 when Poland took the EU presidency, the presidency in the EU Council. And this was a big thing for us because it was the first time we did it. So how is it for Portuguese politicians, for Portugal as a country, to take a lead now?
So, well, once again, thank you very much, Dr. Bonikowska, and actually Dr. Pietres as well. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you and with a Polish and international audience, a country I absolutely admire, and I think I understood right the first time I was there in the beginning of the 90s that it would go over what is the south of Portugal with a very big speed. Although if you would just look at the appearances, I remember the first time I was in Poland was in this very important city that I can never pronounce correctly, Lodz.
Yes.
Lodz.
You have the regards from Mr. Tomasz Łukaszuk, our former ambassador to Indonesia and also to India. Your Excellency Tomasz Łukaszuk, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. So greetings from Tomasz.
Thank you very much.
So how was it for Portuguese to
well, you see, as a Portuguese, in '96 when I was there the first time, it was the only time I was in the city. I mean, you would say, oh, disaster, terrible. The construction, even the way, from Warsaw there, you would say, oh, the poor level of constructions. But then you would start speaking with people, and you would realize that the cultural level and the teaching. I mean, communism was certainly not a good system. I think that Polish people did really not like it. But the reality is that in terms of education, I think Polish people, as it is the case in the East in general, in Ukraine, for instance, I think that Portuguese know more Ukrainians than Polish, because there was an enormous wave of Ukrainian migrants into Portugal that went everywhere, to the Azores, for instance. And so Portuguese people got to know a lot about Polish and about Ukrainian more than about Polish. But it's true that, I mean, the drama of the south of Europe, and Portugal is a case in point, is that we do not have the same tradition of education, and in several domains like music, for instance, where I was absolutely amazed with the level that normal people, the level of teaching that people would have. But I'm speaking a lot about this Portuguese view of Poland. But let me tell you that it's true. I've been here for 25 years, although, you know, especially as a member of the parliament representing the Azores, I lived in the Azores most of my Portuguese life, but I actually was born in Lisbon.
Tell us more how the Portuguese now see the presidency as a tool, as a chance to say
exactly.
something. Because you
Yeah,
know,
but let me be first a bit European. Let me, if with your permission, let me be a bit European, because I remember 25 years ago, you know, the buzzword was, well, we have to reform Europe, you know, because you know, Mr. Kissinger said, oh, when I want to phone to Europe, which phone should I have? You know, that was the buzzword. Oh, we have to know clearly who is in command and so on and so on. And actually, the end result of all this reform of the European Union was a system where there is, you know, endless number of phones. If the successor of Mr. Kissinger wants to call Europe, I mean, who is Mr. Europe? Oh, I mean, you would have to get a training of 6 months to understand the intricacies, well, just of the council, because I think Dr.
But we hope Joe Biden understands now the European Union.
Well, I don't think Europeans understand it, and even less the Americans. It's really, I mean, this issue of having the presidency that is presidency for some respects, but not for others, not in the foreign affairs, and then there is the trio. I mean, the trio or the troika, if you prefer, and it makes me think about this the Holy Trinity, you know. And
Paulo, let me stop for a little while, because Jarek, maybe you can explain better how the troika means three countries connected, you know, under the 18 month of the common agenda can work together, because we just finished the German presidency and we will follow with the Slovenian presidency, and that's the troika we are having right now.
You know, one of the worries for the EU Council was always that you've got a half year for presidency. It's a very short period to achieve something. If you've got a significant issue to be discussed, and you want to solve this issue, which is controversial generally, between 27 member states, half a year is very little. It is not enough time to really go through it. Therefore, there was always discussion how we may prolong continuity between presidencies. And one of the forums which was chosen was to create a troika. Troika, which takes three presidencies, which on the one hand allows three presidencies to establish a common program. So they, at the beginning of, before they start the three presidencies, they put all the priorities on the paper and they establish a common program for the trio presidency. And every presidency then takes part of it and tries to carry over in discussions with other member states. However, you know, with the presidency and with the troika is a following, I would have a following comparison. If you've got a bus with 27 passengers and one of them is going to be driver, then you say, okay, let's make a three people that will be responsible for driving. Obviously, they can discuss the roadmap, how to go from where to where, with what speed and so on. But when it comes to actual driving, there's only one driver, and that's a presidency. So whatever happens, the troika can establish a common roadmap. They could say, we will follow the route, and then this route will be partially taken by a first presidency, this time Germany. Next will be Portugal, and after Portugal, Slovenia. However, in reality, when you drive, you think I'm better than my colleagues and I will drive more quickly. But then suddenly you've got a difficulty because the engine doesn't work and therefore you are stopped. So you do not really reach what you wanted. So there are many things on the way. And generally, when you've got a program, it's never delivered in the exact shape as was proposed.
We just hope that the European engine works this
No,
time.
it works. But remember one thing which is important. In the Lisbon Treaty, there has been a change by establishing much more permanent bodies, permanent positions. For example, President of the European Council is a permanent position. High Representative, which is the head of the Council for Foreign Affairs, is also permanent. So what you have is more additions, which limits the role of rotating presidency. It is one of the elements to overcome this half a year, very short period to discuss issues. I mean, in foreign relations, you cannot have a change of priorities every half a year. This would be something incredibly difficult. You know, how you could not only phone high representative, but how you would know that this person can have as the same priorities this semester and not the next semester. So
Right.
there is a reason for that. But for other areas, there is a much more role for member states. And I think member states treat now the council as a place where they could much more easily voice their concerns. You've got commission, which is the biggest and most powerful body in terms of execution and initiated agenda on initiating legislation and so on. And then member states sometimes are surprised how far Commission would like to go. And the only place that they could voice sensitivities to particular member states is the Council. So therefore they cope with the presidency. Therefore they want presidency to express views which are common for all member states.
We were discussing in Poland very vividly the German presidency because we had a lot of controversies around the budget, and they were also, some voices that we should, the government of Poland should, veto the budget and then wait for the Portuguese presidency to change the atmosphere to make the situation better. Paulo, how would you describe now, the differences also between the Portuguese view on the European affairs and views of countries like Germany or France or maybe Slovenia even, which goes next after Portugal?
Well, you see, I think that the big surprise of this financial discussion, and I was previously, a long time ago when I was in the council, the Portuguese permanent representation, I was linked with the discussion of the Agenda 2000 at the time, a long time ago, over 20 years ago, is that Germany really switched positions. I think that, there was a political institutional problem that Poland and Hungary raised. I think that you know it better than me. But in real financial terms, that is the will or the permission of the German Ministry of Finance to allow for a big effort. It was there, which was not the case before. I remember when we had it was very, very, very funny that when we had the meetings at the council, in preparatory for the groups at the group level. Sometimes, in my group that was discussing structural funds, we had representatives of the lender. Some other times we had the Ministry of Finance, and nothing would, it would be like two different countries. The German lender would say, well, we want more money, we want to have easy ways of spending it, and the Ministry of Finance would say exactly the opposite. No, you have to stop it. So it was, Germany, even there, from this point of view, was interesting. So I do not think that this is the crucial element. I think, what is really new, and I have to say, to a lot of my surprise, is that in strategic terms, Portugal, and I just read the documents again, made a very interesting reading of priorities in the name of Europe. And Portugal and the minister just gave some interviews to the European press. He fundamentally said, yes, okay, there is this big agreement with China in terms of investment. We will obviously cooperate in our role, because if it was signed now, it has to be ratified, and we will cooperate to put it in the agenda. But the main issue, the main strategy, and where we want to, our card of the Portuguese presidency is India. And that's really a novelty.
Pablo, before we go deeper into the Asian relations, European Asian relations, I want to ask Jarek if you can just tell us now, from the a little bit distance point of view, what you're still in Brussels for so many years. How would you describe now the key issues Brussels really discusses, and where is the political concentration of mindset of the politicians, political elite, and officials in Brussels?
Yeah, look, maybe one word on what you have been asking before concerning whether we could wait for a Portuguese presidency in order to solve very difficult issues. The problem is that it might be, in this case, the role of presidency might be exaggerated, because it is not so much possible by one country to superimpose on rest element of the compromise. It is rather a bit different. The presidency has to look for a compromise by taking elements from every member state that puts some voices. If Poland at that time had a very strong views, they were not exactly shared by many other countries. There were some other countries that would probably be able to join, but not so many. Remember that some of the countries are under pressure to get in touch with the money that one day should come. And
so in other words, you are saying that it wasn't much sense, just to mention, to wait.
I think if you assume that it is only presidency that could change substantially, this assumption is wrong. It is not so much presidency that would be able to make a change. It is all remaining 26 countries that would give an additional effort. And secondly, I mean, be realistic. Country like Germany has a huge persuasion power on many other countries. Even those who would be not very happy with the outcome could, under pressure from German politicians and with contacts, there are plenty of other ties with Germany they would come and say, okay, we don't like it, but we agree. If Portugal is doing the same, the persuasion power of Portugal as a presidency is much weaker. Therefore, they do not risk much by saying to Portugal, we don't like it. Whereas they might risk a bit more when saying it to Germany. Therefore, I think Portugal would have much more difficulty in wrapping it over. So it would rather go to Slovenia. And then if it goes to Slovenia, the situation is similar, because it's, again, persuasion power of Slovenia is not so significant, and you have to invent elements. The only thing that was important in this context is that there was a pressure of time. For many countries, time was money. Time was very crucial. Therefore, they wanted to have it. But now, when you look currently at what is being discussed, I think one has to say that everyone in Brussels, like everyone else or privately, has been really affected strongly by COVID. So whatever you touch, whatever kind of area you discuss, you think what the COVID has changed, what the pandemic has changed. And if it relates to finance, what we have to do in order to ensure that we come out with economy that is properly financed, what we do with innovation, what we do with many other areas, what we do with health. Health was never was never really European problem. Health systems are national problem. And suddenly
Stop.
it became a issue that involves Europe because together it is much easier to solve it. But the outcome of COVID, of pandemic, is for many other areas. For example, what happens on the frontiers, even these days, or between Germany and Czech Republic, for traffic of goods. So you've got people that are dealing with trade are saying we have to find a ways how to deal with that. And I think this type of mentality of COVID, what COVID really changed in the functioning of the various European institutions, programs, and the need for political response is really valid. And the
So it's
second
also
issue,
like how to use this crisis to take some lessons
that's it.
and make some changes, right?
That's right. Because in the long run, and I was really amazed being here to see that in a daily work, when you deal with various papers, small documents coming here and there is still a long-term view taken, and slowly this long-term view is built into a daily program. So even now, people are thinking what we will do when COVID is over. And let us look back, during the World War II, there were still fronts, there was still catastrophe, disaster, not a pandemic, but a war disaster. And you had conferences establishing IMF, World Bank, and arranging new world order after the war. So the same now, people are thinking, okay, we've got a pandemic which has created a huge problem for functioning of the EU, but what will be after? How we will work more after? And
So it's
among
like a
those things,
preparing ground for this new normal after pandemic is over, right?
that's right. And obviously they look what kind of implications, what kind of impact pandemic had. For example, for Portuguese presidency, it is, among other things, the question of social disparities. So it says about more fair and social Europe as a program for Portuguese presidency. But also it's a question of mm, carbon neutrality by climate action by 2050, but much earlier. So you have to lay ground right now. So you think how to come out of the post-pandemic into post-pandemic economy, which would already go towards more green, more clean, and more carbon-free economy. And the third issue is digital economy, because what has appeared globally is that digital issues are becoming a backbone of economic development. And if Europe is delayed in digital issues and digital market, it may lose in the longer run. Therefore, I think this is being linked also to this thinking about the future in the long term, that this has to be developed.
So definitely you described very well, this power, this desperate looking for using this crisis in a way to come out of it with something better for the future. Let me read the 5 lines of the Portuguese presidency, which were described as the key lines. It's resilient Europe, green Europe, digital Europe, social Europe, and global Europe. Jarek mentioned already several of these, and also Paolo, you were mentioning Asia, so global Europe. You mentioned particularly Asian countries, and could you just elaborate a little bit more about how Portuguese, who were always looking global, we learn at school that you were, almost the
always.
first to expand, to put Europe far away and to start European expansion. So how the Portuguese now see the global order, and where in this global order is Europe and it's China, and you also mentioned India.
Yeah, well, I will jump to that. Of course, that there would be a lot of other issues to think about, but I would like you to that what you said was true, but I think it was more gentle than true, because there was a short period of time where Portugal was really global, but it was very short. And then, unfortunately, we had anti-Semitism that actually, I think it was the biggest disaster that happened in Portugal. It was back in the 16th century, but we had it. Well, started in the end of the 15th century, and actually, if you go to history, and you will see that the most relevant people that were in connection with globalization, they were expelled, they were persecuted, and if they were not Jews, they would be called Jews. You know how the logic goes. And actually, the Portugal of the 20th century is a very inward-looking Portugal. It's a Portugal of our dictator. From a variety of points of view, I don't think you can compare it with other dictators in Europe, even in Spain. Spain was really a bloodshed. I would not
It's a
compare it
long term. It ended in 1975, and that's only
exactly. 74 was a revolution. So, well, we started again to see where we are. I don't think that Portugal still has a global look, but I would say I'm very enthusiastic by our foreign affairs minister paper on India, and India is really the issue because I mean, without prejudice of all the rest, but all the rest has been there. I mean, the social issue, okay, it's one of the leitmotifs of the Portuguese presidency that is more highlighted that with Germany, but the rest is fundamentally the same. What is different is India. And for the first time, it was not the Portuguese-speaking world, because normally this is the role that Portugal took up to now, the Portuguese-speaking world. Of course, it is very important. Some of the things have been discussed, regarding Mozambique, the jihad in Mozambique, which is a very important issue. Angola, the negotiations with the European Union. Brazil, actually, there is nothing on Brazil. But actually, I don't think it's bad, because it's a symbol that in Portugal, we start to have people thinking on a real global perspective.
So let me at this moment, because maybe not everybody would know in Poland that the Portugal also created in 1996, if I remember, a community of Portuguese-speaking countries, basically former colonies. You mentioned some of them. It's 7
Exactly.
countries plus Portugal. So it's not only the Brits or the French or the Spanish who do it, but also the Portuguese. But what is it, this community for you? What are really the relationship between Portugal and these countries?
Yeah, well, the problem is that they are more rhetoric than reality. And even when it touches, for instance, I think that, well, in the past, when we made big discussions on trade discussions with Brazil, well, Portugal would focus more on this small interest and this small question than seeing the global picture of what it means Brazil. Because we do share the same language, and we do share a lot of other things in terms of culture and so this is a very important feature of Portugal. Of course, Portugal is one of this old colonial. Well, it was the first European colonial power, and this still shows, and that's important. But what I really think it's important is that Portugal was able, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, whom I'm not, personally acquainted with it, I'm saying that very objectively, I think that he really made it, because he understood that, well, Germany has actually a very commercial-minded leadership that has been like that for a very long time. Actually, it's not so financially minded as it used to be. That's what I think was a big transformation. And by the way, Dr. Pieters, you are absolutely right regarding the role of the presidency. Means nothing. The German presidency would be much easier than a Portuguese to sort out all these issues. But there is when China is really appearing as a strategic rival to all of the European powers. I mean, Germany really pressed very hard for this agreement with China. Portugal, of course, understands its position. We are going for the ratification, but at the very same time, the minister said, the revamped European Union India link could rebalance China ties. This is, and it develops the idea. And I think he is absolutely right, because democracy is a very important issue. India, that has loads of problems, you never finish, but it is intrinsically a democratic country. It's not a rhetoric figure to say it is the biggest democracy in the world. I am convinced it is the biggest democracy in the world.
Well, it's interesting what you're mentioning, because there is a question from the audience also. Maybe I will put it to Mr. Pietras. How far, for example, Poland, but let's speak about Central Eastern European countries, really can share this kind of logics that we are much less actually global in the thinking. And I don't know if you agree with me, but for many people in Central Eastern Europe, Asia is basically China today. It's actually China. The rest is much less, even India, such a big country, it's much less discussed. So, Dr. Pietras, how do you see that we can find a common ground in looking basically on China, but also on Asia as now one of the big players, especially because of the US puts Asia on the first front, and Asia Pacific becomes or became already a key point of reference for Washington.
Yeah, I think for Europe, what is a difficulty is a diversity inside, which means that countries have got a bit of different focus. When you look at Portugal, I always observing Portuguese representatives in the council. I would say when it comes to the Portuguese language, they suddenly remind us that there is a large number globally of people speaking Portuguese outside of Portugal, which is only in other cases similar. Spanish, maybe French, English, a bit of German, but not so many languages are being spoken so widely like Portuguese. And it shows that there are also interest in Portuguese area. When you look at Spanish, you will be not surprised that Latin America is close to hearts of Spaniards. When it comes to Polish, it's very often we are looking to the east, we look into Ukraine, to Belarus, to our eastern neighbors, and to see how we could affect this region and how this region affects us, and whether the EU could help us to address the same issues. So there is a difference of focus. And when you put the things together, it means that you've got countries which are interested in different parts of the world. So Europe as a whole is interested very much globally. But it is not so determined to establish strategic priorities. And I think here there are a number of choices to be done, and Europe comes much more slowly to selection of choices. For example, the China is a very important partner. It becomes very important economically for some countries. It tries to get investment and bring Chinese technology and also many other things to Europe, to various places. But being so important, it also affects our perception of what is the role of China. And I think just having also good contacts to India and to some other countries is something which is important for a policy. And this is an element of a strategic thinking. What we would like to achieve by enhancing contact with some other places, not only with China and so on. And I think Americans have understood also that for them, this kind of priorities has to be very clear. And they were pushing a bit of Europe in order to have also a much more clear position on China, for example, or on other places. I hope that we'll have much closer communication now with Americans to have also a bit more clarity whether we've got a same type of approach to some global issues. This change of political role of various countries is also reflected in a global order or even institutional global order. For example, China is not so well represented in the World Bank and IMF, and they say we cannot be responsible. So, but if you give more power, it means also you will accept more Chinese money over there. It becomes also much more decisive, and this also you have to accept. So this is a element of a game which is and the reflection which is to be done. And I think, as a matter of fact, I was amazed by how Portugal is taking up this global agenda. And I think that despite what Paulo has said, there is a understanding for globality, which comes from the nearly Middle Ages, a bit later. Until now, the globality is somehow in the blood, understanding travel, understanding contacts, understanding relationships. It's not only about culture that you've got with Brazil. It's plenty of economic ties with Brazil. And if you take a number of flights between Lisbon and Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo, you see that it's a linkage which is very important. I think this helps also Portuguese presidency to address these global issues.
And just to remind everyone, you know, we discuss it very rarely. Portugal is really rarely on our radar, but it's really important to stress Portugal is 10 million people, and those who speak Portuguese, it is 250 million people. So it's really a large population, and it's a large, network to be used in a way. So Portugal can feel two ways, can feel a country with its own diaspora and its own community, but it's a very European country in the same time. We quoted that 93% of Portuguese are very much for the deeper integration in the European Union. So this brings us together because also Polish people are very, very pro European Union and pro integration. We are happy being the member state. Paulo, I wonder, a part of these global issues, I wonder how the Portuguese look at Europe, look at European Union. Is it a tool to make Portugal stronger and more influential, or what is it for you?
Well, I think that still complementing what you were saying, I think that is there is one thing that really unites Portugal and Poland, which is, I think, a view of the transatlantic relationship as vital for both countries. You know, from this point of view, Portugal and Poland, I think we are really on the same wavelengths. But regarding to the vision of Europe, I think most of the times the vision has been a bit too much parochial from the point of view that Europe is seen too much as a financial source, which is a bit a distorted vision, in my opinion. It's not really as much as people put in their imagination. And this distorts a bit the logic. And this sometimes does not allow people to understand how crucial it is, the integration, and how crucial the political side of the issue is. I think that the political integration of Europe is something very important. Most of the Portuguese, I think, see that in a favorable way. And other than this, the question of the rule on our world, democracy is really the most important thing. The issue with China is not China. I mean, the problem is that China is not a democratic country.
One more question from the floor, as far as China is concerned, from Tomasz Łukaszuk, is about the dilemma. Maybe Paulo, you can find the answer between what to do, having in Asia very strong Chinese presence and Chinese also development aid and financial help and contracts and Belt and Road Initiative. How the EU should react to that?
Yeah, well, you see, sometimes we in Europe tend to forget one thing. Europe is more or less a peninsula of this Euro-Asian continent, and actually Asia is more than half of the world population, and just China and India is more than a quarter. And so, I mean, and not only because of these figures, more important than this, because of the dynamic, the Indo-Pacific dynamic. Obviously, things are going to be centered more and more there, and there is not much we can do about it. I mean, it's not a viable strategy to speak about China versus Europe. No, I mean, it's going to be there. The issue is what is going to be the driving force? Is it going to be more or less democratic? And then, of course, you have Japan, you have South Korea, you have lots of Asia is a complex thing, but you cannot escape the country that most likely is going to be the biggest in the world very soon, because it is the most important of them all. And to have something to, to have a different perspective to offer to the Chinese Belt and Road, I think that there is the economic side of the Belt and Road, the fact that China was able to recycle productively a lot of its surpluses. It's good in itself. Of course, you can make a lot of criticism. Oh, a lot of these projects are not going. They are good. They are badly run. They are not efficient. So on, so on, so. Well, okay, but the very fact that the money is rolling is good. What we have to understand is that, unfortunately, India is far from being in a position to compete with China. It's very far, and sometimes I have to say that. And so we have to have a strategy to help democratic countries.
So let's move to Jarek. Jarek, what is your understanding actually about following the question of Tomek Łukaszuk about this dilemma the developing country have, whom to choose, Europe or China, where to go? What can we offer? What are we willing to offer now?
Look, I think we should not compete with China in just replicating what they do. Europe is a large donor for development in many developing countries. It offers plenty of programs and huge amount of money. I think that Europe is one of the biggest donor globally to development in developing countries. And when you come to Africa and some other places where you see China offering aid, very often it is being offered together with a technology, with people coming, and sometimes you don't see this type of organic involvement between local people and these new types of presence of Chinese. I think let me tell something different, but it's very important in this context. The president of Singapore once being asked whether China will be able to compete and win in the competition with US, he said, not really, because Chinese have got a huge society, so they can draw on the basis of 1 billion of talents and maybe select from those even more talented and push country forward. However, United States, even being much smaller, can draw on global talents, can bring any talent from the world and can use this talent for their own purpose, but also for the global progress. And he said, and therefore, US being so open will create much more impact because people will tend to come and go over there. I can give you another example. I met a Bangladeshi person working in New York, and she said to me that she's fully integrated. She feels like at home. She has a brother who works in China. And I asked about whether he feels integrated. He said, no, he is not Chinese. He cannot be integrated. And that's make a bit of difference. I think that Europe has got a huge potential because in some places, Portuguese are very much welcomed because there are plenty of contact and cultural closeness and also even language. French has got the plenty of other countries with a very good contact. The same with for many other countries, Spanish with Latin America and so on. So Europe has got a plenty of impact on these countries, and Europe as a whole is offering a soft power. Is not forcing, but is offering money. Very often I hear criticism. Europe is offering money, is not getting anything back. But demanding something immediately back, it is a short time view, because you may get something immediately, but then you are treated as someone which comes just to earn money. So I think Europe in the long run is a bit like a old poker player who loses many times, but in the long run, he wins.
Let's hope so. But Tomasz Łukaszuk, the ambassador Łukaszuk, just reminds us not to feel too good, because the EU is maybe the biggest donor still. But if you take into consideration the Belt and Road Initiative, China now is bigger. So that's a very common, statement we hear in Asia very often, Southeast Asia, South Asia, that Europe doesn't do enough really to be visible, to be active. Also, maybe because we are not a country, we are a conglomerate of 27 different organizations, and we just have a controversy now around Borrell's visit to Russia, and everybody discusses this was a good thing or bad thing. So having said that, I don't want just to focus only on Asia, but I would go back to Paulo to discuss a little bit economy, because we often say that Poland and Portugal are now very similar as far as the economic level. We sometimes even say that we've beaten Portugal already. We are better off now. Still not so well off as Spain, but we are heading towards. So taking into consideration also cooperation with Asia and global markets, how do Portuguese expect to go out of this post-COVID crisis, and what is the key for you as far as the economy?
Well, you see, I think that Poland, that's exactly what I was saying in the beginning. I think I understood the first time I got there that Poland would we would just see Poland going through, because the level, the cultural level of the country is absolutely outstanding. You are an outstanding, and that's the crucial thing. It's Portuguese take some time in the south of Europe, sometimes, okay, well, Italy, for instance, is very good in terms of some parts of Italy, of course. The north of Italy is very good in entrepreneurship. It's true. You have the sort of entrepreneur that understands and sees and goes and so on and so on. Some parts of Portugal as well, but the fundamental capital is the human being. And you have very, very good trained people, very knowledgeable, very cultivated as a whole.
Maybe Portuguese companies should have more tie-ups with Polish companies and Polish, individuals.
No, I think
we are on the opposite, parts of Europe, really being called quite often periphery even of Europe.
Well, there are, of course, there were some links actually. One of, as you know, this. Although I'm not sure if they were very successful in terms of supermarkets and things like that. But I think that Poland has also another advantage we have to understand, is because the close proximity with Germany, because Portugal put all its strategy on a logic of a bit like competing for German market, and of course from this point of view Poland is much better situated.
So you consider it as an asset, right, that we are so close to Germany?
Absolutely, of course. Historically, I'm not going to discuss that, but economically, that definitely yes. Other than what is the number one asset of Poland? The Polish people. Sure. Second one, you are close to the markets that really matter, namely Germany. Certainly. But for Portugal, it means that we must think differently, and we must understand that we are not in the same position as Poland. So we have to see a lot of things that go on elsewhere. Of course, Asia, nobody can forget. It's Asia is the global power. right now. But Africa and South America and so on, and Portugal has to understand a bit this. You gave the example of the airplanes, which is a bit obvious. I mean, because but that's about the only thing that you can mention as a good connection between Portugal and Brazil. Portugal did not manage to think much about it. Hopefully, it will. But fundamentally, I think that Poland is the greatest in terms of economic development. I mean, that's what the figures say. It's not what I think.
But we
The,
still have some good effects of the economic development despite the pandemic. But everybody worries. I think all over Europe, everybody worries what will happen this year.
yeah,
What will be the effects of pandemic, right? And lockdown.
yeah. You see, my opinion there, I'm so sorry, Dr. Pietros, but there I do not agree with you. To compare the pandemic with the World War is absolutely nonsense. But that's what people are doing in Portugal. They are, they are treating it as a war. I think it's a big mistake. It's not true. Second thing, it's not at all guaranteed that we will see a post-COVID, because no one knows about these mutations, and the vaccinations will work or will not work with new mutations. And I think the best thing we should do is to think, well, it's possible we have to live with it for a very long time. So we just have to keep cool, try, of course, to make our best, not to destroy Europe, because we are destroying Europe. What we are witnessing now in terms of restrictions of traveling, it's very, very worrisome. It's destroying the most important thing that we have built for such a long time in the name of the virus. And of course, people say, "Oh no, it's going to be next month, or summer, or autumn, or." But that's exactly what was said last year. And we have no guarantees that the situation will really change so dramatically. So we have to think about these medicines, how to cope with it. Of course, to make an effort, but not to destroy our social life.
I'm not so sure if I can name your comment optimistic or pessimistic, what you said at the end.
Well,
But at the end, I want to ask Dr. Pietras, because that's exactly, time flies. We are having already 6 o'clock. So I just want to finally ask you, you now teach in College of Europe. It's, the heart of European education, about those who want to work in the European institutions. What do you tell them now? What do you tell your students about, the European's future and the European Union actually as an organization? How can we use this crisis? What will happen?
For Europe, every crisis, and when you look back, it's always true, have been helpful to find solutions. And therefore, you had a number of situations that Europe was coming to the wall, where there were difficulties, and then very quickly things had been solved. Even if you look back for financial issues, before the crisis, many things like banking union or financial union were nearly forbidden. Ministers of finance say never. Then the crisis came, and within weeks' time, there has been progress made that couldn't have been made for many, many years. So I think that every crisis gives an advantage to think how we could do it differently. And the major issue is whether Europe is a part of the solution or part of a problem. And the pandemic shows that within Europe, you could have a better solutions if you are not hampering cooperation in internal market. For example, when you try to solve pandemic issues on a territory of one country, suddenly you create problems for traffic and you harm your own economy. So when lorries cannot cross frontiers, it's not only difficult for your partners, but also difficult for you. And then you have to think twice whether it's something which is good. So I think Europe should find a way of showing solutions to the issue. And I agree with Paulo on the issue that what pandemic has brought to us, it will stay for many years. Not necessarily exactly the same format, but many things will stay. Some of them will be positive. For example, we have been jumping into video conferencing, maybe too rapidly, but in the meantime, technology has been solved to such a manner that we can see each other quite clearly, we can listen to each other quite clearly, get engaged, discuss, disagree over the internet. That has been not so easy 10 years ago. And then you see this type of things will stay. For example, in the EU, decision-making process always required people to come to Brussels. But I think from now on, not necessarily always. Only for difficult issues, only when there will be need to people to discuss much more closely.
So
And
I would take it also as an optimistic remark, and I would say the pandemic brought us some progress, that we don't always need to do everything in the old way, right?
yeah, I think it is a bit of optimism here. And I was really amazed by the resilience of economies, because with such a high, if someone over a year ago would tell me that people will not be able to travel for non-essential purposes, that shops will be closed in some countries, only those who are essential will be open, like in Germany, that restaurants and whole hospitality will be closed. If all those elements, which are now nearly every country present, will be introduced, a year and a half ago, I would say Europe faces a huge crisis. It is not imaginable how we could live with that. But we are living. But we
We'll
are
live
living.
with it.
And you say, in some countries, economy has been affected for 1, 2, 3%. In some countries has been not really affected negatively or to achieve negative numbers. It's still developing. But still, I think overall it has been resilience. And resilience, I think, because of the people who have applied certain measures to react. Also, we have developed new technology like video conferencing, which helps many companies to function without people being in place and with the people respecting rules. So all these things gives us positive vision of the future, which will be different. And that I fully agree.
So again, the word resilience seems the key word, and the key word. And let's hope the European Union will really be resilient enough to make some progress after the pandemic is over, or maybe during the pandemic, even if it's never over. Thank you, gentlemen, for this time. It was a pleasure to have you both. Paulo Kazaka and Dr. Jarosław Pietras were with us. Thanks everyone who followed us. And next Tuesday we'll discuss Germany. Be with us.
Thank you very much.